Voronoff's experiments. Another important method of rejuvenation that has been attempted is by no means of glandular transplantation. This method, called homoplastic, was attempted in the 18th century by Hunter. Steinach performed this experiment on rats, implanting sex glands from the body of a young animal into an old one. The result expressed itself in a high sexual stimulation and an increased vitality. Lichtenstein followed Steinach's example, applying the method of grafting on men suffering from testicular degeneration using glands from healthy young organisms. From these graftings, according to Lichtenstein, a complete restoration of the psychic condition took place. At the same time, the muscles grew stronger, hair began to grow anew, etc. However, many failures were reported by the use of this method. Quote, "To operate on old men over 68 years of age is impossible," unquote, says Steinach, "for their tissues are degenerated and they cannot feed the newly implanted young glands. The implantation, receiving no nourishment, dies." The first to adopt this method of grafting on a large scale was Voronoff. While previous investigators put the implanted glands into various parts of the body, he placed them in their natural position. Voronoff applied his method both on animals and men. He began with rams and oxen, for these animals, when castrated, changed their appearance so essentially that they attract immediate attention. If castration is performed in their early youth, it interferes with the development of their horns. If, on the other hand, the operation is performed later, after the horns have already developed, the existing horns stop in the process of development and assume the form of the horns of a female of the same species. A change also takes place in the structure of the head. It becomes somewhat narrower than the head of a normal animal. The legs grow long and the body takes on much fat. One also notices a characteristic modification in their psychic condition. The animals become staid and lose their capacity for affection. In these animals, which had lost their symptoms of sex and had become neutral, Voronoff transplanted testicles taken from younger animals of their species. He says, quote, "The changes which they undergo because of the operation are remarkable. The horns begin to grow large and massive, and fat disappears, and the muscles gain strength. They become aggressive and wild, and seek females which, sensing the male in them, run forward to meet them." Unquote. The effect of the operation, according to data furnished by Voronoff, continues for several years. In his laboratory, Voronoff had rams which he operated on 7 years previously, and they still manifested the symptoms of normal animals. After having obtained such remarkable results with animals, Voronoff proceeded to apply his method of rejuvenation to men. In July 1923, he announced before the International Congress of Surgeons that he had succeeded in rejuvenating 44 men. In all cases, a gradual disappearance of the symptoms of senility took place. The blood pressure became normal, the eyesight improved, the muscles stronger, the hair regrown. In reports read before congresses in Paris, London, and Bucharest, 1922 to 1927, Voronoff disclosed his experiments on human rejuvenation. In operating on men, he used the testicles of monkeys, which he implanted into them. The operation was practically painless, causing neither local nor general reaction. Here is the description of an operation. Quote, "The patient is a dramatist, now 70 years old, and had undergone 2 operations previously. The first operation was performed about 7 years ago, November 16th, 1920. The second one 4 years ago, June 13th, 1923. 7 years ago, this writer was a decrepit old man, his figure bent, his cheeks fallen in and wrinkled, and his eyes dull and listless. Any physical effort was too difficult for him, and he was forced to sit and rest. He did work, but his memory was almost blank. His imagination was inactive, and his literary ability was at a standstill, reflecting on this one-time brilliant mind quite ruinously. Observation of this subject 2 years after the dramatist's first operation were recorded thus. Quote, "His figure straightened up, the muscles of his face strengthened, his gaze became animated, and in spite of his white hair, he appeared young and energetic, which is very amazing. He has returned to his former life, taking long walks and visiting the theatre, but what affords him most joy is to be able to again take up his pen and do some light creative work for many hours, without tiring." This condition continued for about 3 years. During this time he lived a full life. Gradually, fatigue began to return to him. He insisted on a new operation, June 13th, 1923. 6 months after the operation, the patient wrote, quote, "The result of the operation this time manifested itself rather blatantly. The effect of the transplantation which, after the first operation, had made itself felt within 2 months, is now after 4 months beginning to appear. However, I am again feeling as strong as I felt after the first operation. Again, thanks to the operation, I am in possession of both physical and cerebral energy. I am working and am in a position to finish my new play." Unquote. In reality, however, this method of rejuvenation through grafting is imperfect and gives often doubtful results. This is because senility is related to the decline of other endocrine glands and to a general condition of auto-intoxication, which must affect the implanted glands in time. This modern view of senility is expressed by Dr. Sokolov as follows. Quote, "Old age appears to us as a deformation under the influence of auto-intoxication or intoxication of one or more endocrine glands." Unquote. Foe found that, in grafting the genital glands of young animals into old ones, he did obtain rejuvenation of these animals, but very rapidly the young genital glands took on the characteristics of the genital glands of the older animal and declined. It was affected by auto-intoxication. Another fact which should be considered in this connection is the antagonism between the organism and the engrafted gland, especially if this comes from another species. Concerning this point, Dr. Sokolov remarks, quote, "The testes of the monkey stand no chance of surviving in the human organism. They are bound to be destroyed within a few months. Hence, in cases of grafts from monkeys, a temporary secretion of sex hormones takes place, a temporary stimulation of the forces of the organism. Then the gland dies, and the patient relapses into his former state." Unquote. Sokolov, Biodynamics.